Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired. Sup, Holmes?
Beware your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Thank you so much, Sinistar, and thank you, David Gallant?
Gallant.
Gallant. How was that growing up?
It was kind of annoying because everyone would say Gallant or Gallant or whatever, and I used to be really stickler about my name. I still kind of am. Like, someone will say Gallant, and I'll be like, no, it's Gallant. But, people used to call me Dave, and I was just like, no, it's David. You must get my name right.
Gallant, what a wonderful... Did that give you false expectations that you had to live up to? Have you always felt like you needed to be a more gallant guy than everybody else?
A little bit, it is kind of an expectation to live up to. I don't know. I like the name. I mean, I'm kind of glad to have it. I wouldn't want any other last name. But, yeah, I don't know.
For me, it was Holmes, which made people think I was automatically cool and smoking pot. So you'd be like, hey, Holmes, because they said that in Cheech and Chong movies. Or it's just such an easy insult creator, because it's already connected to homeless or homely or has no home, other ways to say homeless. So that wasn't that good for me. I would have taken Gallant any day of the week.
And how uncultured are they? I mean, you're an easy step to Sherlock Holmes.
Well, that would be a compliment. And they're like, no thanks. Let's hurt this young man, which is a tough time growing up. But Gallant, how do you make fun of that? Did they say it sarcastically?
I don't. Most people don't make fun of my name. They'll usually, make fun of my games.
And we'll be getting to that in a second. You make your own video games.
I do.
And you're selling at least one of them for pretty cheap. Have you ever gone for higher than $2 on any of your games for sale?
No, I get this call every day. Is the only one that I've sold.
Okay.
And I don't know. Even asking $2 for me was kind of a weird place because I didn't really know what the value of the thing was. I sort of originally planned to make it available for a true pay what you want. So if you wanted it for nothing, you could get it for nothing. But 4 months into it, after the marathon voice recording sessions, which took a hell of a lot of time to record and master and separate all the files and get them all together, about that point I realized just how much work I'd put into it and thought to myself, if I don't give this any value to myself, if I don't say, hey, this is worth something, how can I expect anyone else to?
Yeah, it's really hard to gauge where value is, but you obviously put so much of yourself into it and worked so hard on it and sacrificed and lost. For people who don't know, you lost a job over this game. Is that right?
Yeah, yes I did. Used to be an employee at Canada Revenue Agency, and the game is mostly inspired by that experience. I've worked at other call centers, but there's definitely, you can see when you play the game, I mean, there's direct references to taxes, and Canada Revenue Agency, that's what I did, is I answered tax questions all day. But it was never really intended to be the game about Canada Revenue Agency. I wasn't saying, well, no, you're working for the Canadian government. But that was enough when they found out about the game, and when a particular newspaper decided to say that it was an online rant against taxpayers, yeah, they decided pretty quickly to sever my employment.
Against all taxpayers everywhere?
That's how the paper spun it, yeah. They didn't sort of see the other side where the game is essentially both about the fact that you have to deal with people who aren't necessarily pleasant to deal with, but then also dealing with this bureaucracy that doesn't let you treat people like human beings. But the paper kind of leaned into only one aspect of that. And, I mean, it's what most people focus on anyways. A lot of people, when they see the game or play the game, are like, Billy's such an idiot. Billy being the caller in the game. And I don't really think of Billy as an idiot. I don't think he has his life together, which is honestly an example of a lot of people that I dealt with on a regular basis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're idiots who just should be, thrown by the wayside. I mean, they're still people. They still have, value. They're not just pariahs of society. So,
sure.
I mean, yeah, I got fired, and then lots of people bought the game.
And stop me if I'm wrong, but you don't. It seemed to me, my impression of the game, from what I've played, I haven't completed it. Maybe someday I will. Are there multiple endings?
There's multiple endings. There's three, I guess you could say, though two of them are pretty similar. Either you try to help the person through the security questions. Basically, he doesn't quite answer them correctly, but you still let it slide. Like, okay, that's good enough. And you do enough of those, and you find out, oh, your manager's been listening to you the whole time, and he's like, oh, you broke our rules, you're fired. Or you respond to the guy when he starts, either calling you out or when he's getting stupid. You then get him angry, and he says, oh, now I want to speak to your supervisor, and your supervisor's like, well, no, I'm not taking another escalated call from you, you're fired. So those two ways you can just lose your job. The only way to quote-unquote win the game, and I use quotes because you're not really winning, is to get through the call. He won't be able to answer your security questions. You'll never be able to do what the caller wants. But he still has no other option but to call back or write in his request. And so you survive the call, even though you haven't really won the situation. And that was the whole point. There's no winning. It's an unwinnable scenario. And that's literally something I had to deal with every day in that job.
Well, that makes me feel a little better. So I didn't. I won as much as you could. And how you said that was an experience you had to deal with every day in that job. How much of an exaggeration would you say it was, and how close to just kind of documentary in MS Paint graphic style interactive gameplay was it?
It's as accurate as I could be without using anyone's actual information. And I've even been accused of recording actual calls for the game, an accusation which is utterly false because there's no way to sort of record a multi-branching conversation with a single person over the phone unless you're actually intending to do that. I mean, everything's made up. Billy is a fictional character. I really hope there's no one named Billy J. Swarth who I've inadvertently offended by making them the star of this game. Even the social insurance number is deliberately one digit less than what a Canadian social insurance number would be, just to make sure that I didn't even accidentally come close to a real one. But other than that, I mean, I literally pulled from situations that I had actually dealt with to write the script, not word for word because I don't have that good of a memory, but just that same tone, that same structure, some of the same things happening, like, hey, I desperately need to change my address because I was supposed to change it last year and I never got around to it, and now my check is going to my girlfriend's house, or my ex-girlfriend's house. I've seen all of these situations, and so they all sort of condensed into that one script.
Sure. So what kind of sense does it make to fire someone for just saying that this is what their job is like?
Well, see, here's the thing. They never actually played the game when they were reviewing the situation. My dismissal letter says nothing about the contents of the game itself. Particularly their logic in terminating me came from, he said disparaging things about working in a call center, and he's been identified as working in a CRA call center. Therefore, he said bad things about working in a CRA call center, even though they're technically two different events that just sort of happened to coalesce together. So that was the thrust of it. And, I mean, whether or not that was right is probably something that could be decided a little later. I know of a lot of people tell me I should be pursuing wrongful dismissal for something like that, because it did happen very fast. It even kind of broke some of CRA's own rules for investigating employee actions. They're supposed to give me at least 24 hours notice, and that didn't happen. I was fired the same day they found out.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's funny. The union was actually going to let me file a grievance and fight the fact that they had broken their own rules, but the catch was I had to ask for my job back, and I would have to fight to be reinstated as an employee. And there's no way. There's no way I would go back there.
That's such a hilariously sad irony. In order to get some sort of compensation for being fired from a job that you got fired for saying it's a bad job. You'd have to want the job that was bad that you made the game about. Terrible.
Yeah. It was a horrible twist, and I couldn't believe the gall in their suggesting it.
And what a weird way to get... That was your first step towards the professional for-profit side of game development. Is that right? This game?
Yeah. I mean, essentially... I guess if you define a professional as someone who does a thing and gets paid for it, then yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I've considered myself self-employed for the past, ever since January, basically, because let's face it, I'm not employed and an employer anymore. But I wouldn't even call myself a professional. I mean, at this point, I'm not making enough to live off on the game. Just sort of barely scraping by, and finding another job has been incredibly difficult. So it's gotten pretty tight around here.
I bet it has been. And what a weird foot to get started out on. Your first step into this world is a weird political, you getting criticized for something you didn't actually even do, having to explain yourself and get into, like, honesty battles right away. And already on Twitter, before this started, we got in an honesty battle. These things seem to surround you already. That's my impression anyway.
I don't know why I track this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people who seem to get angry at me for being political and for talking about things that aren't games on my feed, as if because I make games, that's the only thing that's supposed to be in my life. And there are certain things that are really important to me that I talk about and that I tweet about, and that's what my Twitter is. It's a reflection of myself. So it bothers me when people sort of get attracted to me to say that I shouldn't be tweeting about what I'm tweeting about. And someone who basically just said, oh, I went and voted no on every game on Greenlight and left negative comments after my game was rejected. Okay, my game wasn't rejected from Greenlight. I took it down. I have been voting yes on every game on Greenlight for the past 8 or so months, ever since it started, just because I think it's worth more to everyone involved if they at least get one yes vote, and that's what I've been doing. And I haven't left any negative comments on any Greenlights. Maybe one or two. I'm sure someone in the comments will prove me wrong on that. But I just couldn't believe the scope of that.
Yeah, you mean the scope of the what that person? I think it was Unverified Bacon, who I like. We're buddies on Twitter, and I'm sure he thought that was true. He or she, I don't even know the gender actually.
I'm not even sure where they're getting it from.
I wonder. There's something about you that's making this happen sometimes.
Well,
and yeah,
I'm definitely guilty of some of it because I have made enemies. I have talked about things that certain people maybe didn't like me talking about, and there are definitely large groups of people who have pissed off either because I said something about them or I said something about their friends, and there's a huge swath of developers I don't feel comfortable around anymore, and communities where I don't feel like I belong at all. And let's be honest, I kind of don't feel I belong around developers in the first place because I'm kind of a hack. I don't really know what I'm doing most of the time, and me making games are really just sort of a miracle of stuff fitting together and not breaking for a while. So.
Huh. Well, almost every good developer I know feels that way. It's the ones who are like, yeah, I got this all figured out. I'm totally on top of things. They're the ones who either are just making match 3 puzzle games and are only in it to try to make a quick buck, or they just don't really have an accurate view of themselves and they don't end up getting too far. So that's a great attitude to think, in my opinion, that you're still not impressed with yourself and you're trying to improve. But you're from Toronto, is that right? And your abouts are awesome, by the way. I'm just like on the edge of my seat every time you say about. About. So good. I eat that stuff up. But I'm sorry, you were saying the Toronto scene. Were you part of that, or were you dabbling in that at all before what happened at the call center?
Well, the Toronto scene was actually sort of where I got started in game development. I went out to an event hosted by the Toronto IGDA, International Game Developers Association. The Toronto chapter is actually really good in terms of organizing monthly events and having new things to bring people out and bring people together. And at the time, I was writing for a website called PSN Stores, and in my effort to sort of follow different developers on Twitter and get some more information, I happened to find out that several of them were local, and they started promoting the local events, which I eventually showed up to. And so the actual moment where I can say I wanted to become a game developer was after this IGDA event, which was a post-mortem on GDC 2011. So it happened, I think this was in March. GDC had just wrapped up, and some of the devs who went to GDC came back and were sharing their experiences. And so at the social afterwards, I was sitting there in the corner. I don't know any of these people. I'm too nervous. I don't know who to approach and who to talk to, who to say hi. And so at one point I'm getting ready to leave, but I see Craig Adams there. Craig is Super Brothers, basically one of the main guys behind Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery. And this is before Sorcery had come out, and so he was talking about it, but I didn't really have an idea as to what it was. And if you ever hear Craig talk about Sorcery before it came out, like, it was hard to know what it was unless you were actually making the game either. The man was very cryptic about it. It was kind of
even after the fact. I've asked him. He became a superstar after that. It was so exciting to see him at PAX a year or so ago. Had a suit on, all you signing autographs. I think Jack was calling him up on the phone and stuff.
I'm trying to imagine him in a suit.
Yeah, he looked fantastic. That's my only impression of him. But this is long before that. So you're seeing him kind of when he was a cult figure in game development in Toronto. His sprite art, I think, was known in those art circles, but in terms of actually putting games out, he wasn't as well known. So you got to talking with him at the party?
Well, it sort of happened in a weird way. Basically, I saw him, and I was too nervous to say anything, but I did follow him on Twitter, so I tweeted at him saying, "You're like 10 feet away from me, and I want to ask you Sorcery, but I'm too nervous to do that." I sent it out, nothing happened, and so about 10 minutes later, I'm getting ready to go. And so I'm standing up, and I got sort of waylaid by people in the aisles and stuff, and all of a sudden I just hear, "Hey, David?" And turn around, and it's Craig. And I'm like, "Yeah, hi." He's like, "So you're David?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I recognize you by your Twitter avatar." And it just so happened I was wearing the same shirt that my Twitter avatar was wearing at the time. So he just talked my ear off about Sorcery for a good 20 minutes before he had to go and see other people. And just like the way he came out and connected with me, the enthusiasm he had over this thing that he was making, and like it was a thing he was making. It's like, this is a thing that's an idea in my head, but through the magic of code and pixels, it's going to be an actual thing that exists. It just infected me, and I was like, yeah, writing about games is one thing, but I want to be part of this. I want to make something. I want the enthusiasm that this guy has, and to be able to create something just like that. And so that's when I started. That's when I started, learning stuff and applying for internships, and then hey, here we are.
Awesome. Huh? Does Craig know that he was that big of a part of why you got started?
I finally got the chance to tell him at an event called Bazar last year. It ran alongside TCAF, where a whole bunch of video game makers were showing off their games and selling stuff like shirts and buttons and stuff like that. And that's where I was selling the packaged copy of the game. And he happened to show up out of the blue. No one expected him to come. He lives out in like the boonies of Quebec now. He actually, like, it's an area I know because my grandparents live up there, but it's like nowhere. Like, houses are like miles apart, and there's beautiful, gorgeous mountains. He loves nature, as far as I know. But he just showed up, and I'm like, holy crap, Craig Adams, do you know that you are the reason this game exists? and so I was so happy to give him a copy based on that.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's fun to think about. He's an interesting character in the scene, if you even want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I'm not sure if people even like the term indie scene anymore, because it is often too exclusionary in terms of what it means to some people. Other people think it just means, well, you're making it by yourself, so that's independent. That's all it means, a financial definition. But for other people, there's certain style to indie games or certain spirit to indie games, and you have to go out of your way to be more indie than the other guy. And then a really strange thing happened. I was tempted to write about it for Destructoid, but I thought better of it in the end because there was just too many people involved and too much hurt feelings that I really felt like it wasn't worth potentially harming anybody emotionally involved. But there was this Magic Cards deck. Did you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, and it was such an emotionally charged situation for people watching the show who don't know. Some people got together to made a modified Magic Cards deck. I think Edmund McMillan and his wife Danielle were part of it, and they tried to make a kind of cute tongue-in-cheek tribute / parody to all the people who are making indie video games right now, and they made John Blow kind of like a knight, and they made I can't remember a lot of the details, but specifically I was most upset on Anna Anthropy's behalf. And I know Edmund is the first person who told me about Anna. He said had nothing but great things to say about her. He put her character in his game, so I knew he didn't mean any harm by her. Mm-hmm. But, things kind of carelessly fell the way they did. And it was so emotionally charged for everybody involved. And to me, that spoke to the fact that this indie game scene is something that people have a lot of feelings about, and if they feel excluded from it, or if they feel rejected by large segments of it, or just like they don't belong, a little joke like that deck is going to potentially sting a whole lot more. And Jen Frank wrote a really good thing about the passing of the guard between these new people coming up and compared to the old indie game scene, which was often techie dudes who had enough privilege to be able to take time out of their life and buy the equipment necessary to make video games, just very different than a lot of people are coming up now. But anyway, I've gone on a long rant, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that whole thing.
That's a big thing, because
not
just the cards, but just the issue of exclusion in these indie communities is. I mean, I've written about it myself, and that was just from my own particular experiences. The Indie Custom Cube, which was that Magic card thing, I was a pretty loud voice when that came out, to the point where I actually got labeled as a troll by a couple of people involved, by Laura Super Shiggy, who was one of the people involved. Like, I disagreed with her comments because she had wrote the blog post sort of trying to respond as a maker of the cards, how none of this was supposed to be sort of offensive, and I can definitely understand the intention. I'm sure none of them intended any of it to be offensive, but there was a little bit of tone deafness in listening to people explain why they felt it was offensive, which kind of doesn't help the situation. I responded on her blog. I felt it was a polite response, saying, hey, I don't agree with you with one of your defenses. Specifically, she was trying to say that having card types as female, what people weren't understanding was how that works as a Magic mechanic in terms of tribal cards. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Magic the Gathering, and of course your viewers might not be too familiar with itself. Basically, creatures have types, and certain cards can interact with that type. Like, for example, there goblins. There might be creature type goblins, and there might be a goblin lord that gives all goblins +1/+1. So any creature type goblin gets that boost. So there were cards in the Indie Custom Cube that interacted with females. Like, for example, Ananthropy's card, she could put a guilt counter on any non-black, non-female card. Which, I mean, as a mechanic, okay, that's fine. But that mechanic can't be divorced from the context of saying, well, this applies to females. And that Ananthropy is applying something to a female. Like, yes, it's a Magic mechanic, but that doesn't divorce the mechanic from the meaning of those words. If you used, like, a different word that didn't have that kind of baggage, which you can't if you're talking about gender, maybe that might have been different. And she deleted that comment, which was great, I guess, because no one responded to it. They just removed dissenting opinions, while any supporting opinions was left on the blog, even those saying that I was a bad guy for saying stuff like that, and then later called me out as a troll, and Tommy Refn has jumped to her defense, and yeah, so I'm a troll to those people now.
Yeah, well, they are feeling pretty badly, I bet, that this thing they worked on so hard that they meant as a tribute to people that they like, came off the way that it did to so many, and they had their private conversations about it. I hope Anna and Edmund patched it up. None of my business, of course, but as someone who likes both of them personally, I hope that they did. But for you, it sounds like you were trying to voice clarity to why something might be problematic and offensive and divisive and causing some people to feel like they are the exception to the rule, which is already such a big problem with almost every woman I know who's working on video games, indie or otherwise. They feel like they're in a boys' club, and they feel like just for being a woman they have to overcompensate by knowing like every single Donkey Kong game that ever got made, or they'll be called out for not having gamer cred. I was at an Oculus Rift event yesterday with some friends of mine, and a lot of them were women, and just the general sense of like feeling like they're about to get pounced on and accused of not actually liking video games is so palpable with them a lot of the time. It's frustrating. So you're just calling to light an issue. Do you think that maybe you were also emotionally charged about it that made them feel more threatened than you might have intended? Or what do you think happened?
That's a possibility. I mean, I don't know. I guess people have a hard time with the way I get emotional. I mean, I do get emotionally charged about problems that don't affect me personally. That's part of who I am. You know, and let's be honest, like, I'm a white dude. You know, I don't have a lot of these problems, except for the ones that I can arguably say I've brought upon myself. But you know, when I see that kind of, you know, gendered stereotype, when I see that kind of sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? When I just see a lack of forethought into something that could actually potentially be offensive, and sort of not responding to it when it's brought to your attention, it bugs me. It does get me really riled up. Something I've actually had a hard time dealing with, because, you know, I deal with high blood pressure, and I don't react well to stress, and I go through bouts of depression as well. And
sure.
But it's still like I can't stop getting mad when I see it, you know. And sometimes I do like my emotions get the better of me, and I hopefully step back and realize and apologize after the fact. But that's not good enough, you know. Sometimes you gotta calm down. But at the same time, I can't really begrudge anyone's anger when they have been justifiably wronged. I know a lot of people, they get mad at Anna when she gets angry, and she gets angry. But a lot of times when she gets angry, she's justified in getting angry, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think the fact that she's getting angry detracts from the point that she's trying to make, and it maddens me to hell when some people refuse to engage with her just because she's too angry for them. You know, oh, if you were just nicer about this way in which you're being mistreated, then maybe, you know, we would be nicer in helping you fix it. Well, no, that's not how it should work. You know, if she's getting angry, she actually has a really good reason most of the time, and you should be shutting up and listening to her words instead of getting mad at the fact that she's angry in the first place.
It speaks to this kind of, like, people, and you would know a lot about this from working at a call center. There's an entitlement on one end of the call sometimes, where it's like, well, Anna, Anthropy, you should be worried about whether I like you or not, so you should put this in the nicest possible way, because I'm the consumer of your opinion. And she's like, no, I'm pissed off, and she might come off so really strong and really insulting to people that she feels threatened by at the time, or frustrated with, or angry with, or whatever. It doesn't really matter why, but people, I'm getting the sense more and more these days that the consumer of information wants to be kind of kissed up to a little bit before they're willing to even listen to a dissenting point. And people were getting mad on your episode of this show before it even started on Lee Alexander's, which was almost a month ago now. People are still talking about that. People were so angry at Lee, I thought, in part because she doesn't seem to care that much about kissing the larger consumer of information base. She doesn't care about kissing their ass so much. She's saying what she thinks and trying to be entertaining, and I'm always personally impressed with how well she's able to package something in a way that is palatable, even if I wasn't ready for the idea or potentially could be insulted by the idea. She tends to do it in a way that disarms me and gets me to at least think about it. I guess many people don't feel that way because they're mad that she's even willing to say that maybe their tastes aren't totally perfect, which is weird. Have you noticed that? Bubbling up in video game culture over the past few years, this kind of anger at anyone that wants to point out sexism or any sort of problematic content in anything. There's like an active hate of anyone who would dare even bring up those subjects in video games.
Yeah, 100%. And it's maddening because a lot of the times we're just looking for ways to make this medium better. We just not necessarily say, hey, the types of games you like, they'll never be made again. No, there's no lessening of them now. People wanting to make games like like Consensual Torture Simulator or Limb, or come on, David, think of an example that's not Maricopas.
She does make some pretty neat games, though.
Yeah, she does. But even like a bit more mainstream stuff like the Stanley Parable or Gone Home. I don't know. Can you call it Gone Home mainstream? I'd say it's mainstream. It's mainstream to me. So. It's
more mainstream. It was made to package ideas that are not mainstream ideas in a way that was palatable to people who are just like, I know what I like in video games, semi-realistic graphics, walk around in first person. It's really brilliantly put together in that way, but subversive in what it actually ended up trying to deliver. Didn't work for everybody, but I really appreciate the effort. Some people just get mad that that game even exists because why make a game that doesn't have exactly what I want, or at least what I think I want. It's a weird thing. Still trying to get to the bottom of it.
Do these people like go to the nonfiction section in bookstores and yell at all the books that they'll never read? Like I don't understand the anger at someone making a game that you don't like. Mm-hmm. It's not like those people would be making the games you like if they weren't making that game. I'm not going to make a first-person shooter. I might make something in first person one day. I don't know. I'm still very new to game making. I'm probably going to make more stuff like I Get This Call Every Day. Or I might make more stuff like Apocalypse Later. In fact, we're trying to work on a sequel to Apocalypse Later, so in some time in the future there probably will be more stuff like Apocalypse
That's a perfect time to talk about Apocalypse Later. Let's tell people what that thing is.
That was a fun little game to make, actually, because that was my first time collaborating with other people. And it was done over 72 hours at the Toronto Game Jam. And even though I'm a writer myself, I kind of sat back and let a man named Eric Weiss take the reins on writing. He was a journalist, never made a game before, and he was awesome to work with because he would just throw these nuts ideas at the wall, and I just kind of looking, yeah, okay, let's do that. So he's a little boy, but he lives in hell? Okay, sure. The TV, you turn on, and it's got like references to Walking Dead? Okay. There's an ancient demonic curse that summons a platypus? Yeah. Okay. One of his missions is to destroy the economy, and all he does is read a newspaper, and the economy is destroyed? Yeah. Awesome. Let's do that. And it was.
So those were largely. How did that collaboration work? Were you bouncing ideas off each other, or was he kind of launching them at you?
I mean, a lot of it came from him. There was a little bit of refinement on my end. We'd sort of like, hey, what will we do here? And we'd sort of fire back ideas back and forth. We had an artist, but we more sort of like, hey, we need these sprites, and then he kind of went off and did his own things. He was floating between a couple other teams. But Mladen, he still did a great job with the look of the game. I was purposely trying to evoke the feel of an old game that I love called Yoda Stories. It's an old LucasArts game, came out sort of just in the early days of Windows 95. And it was basically a casual roguelike without, before we really started calling games roguelikes, where, the whole premise is it's between the first and second Star Wars movies, I think, and Yoda's just sending Luke on all these dumb missions, like, oh, Han Solo got captured on this planet, go save him. Here's a power converter, you're going to need it. And it was all very simple, like, get one item, at some point use that item and you get another item, and so you follow these item chains until you finish the mission. But its hook was that it randomly generated all the maps so that every time you play, even if you're playing the same mission, it would be like different layout and stuff like that. And it was like just this easy point-and-click interface, little chibi Luke Skywalker just sort of moving around a map and shooting stormtroopers that moved like crazy. I don't know, they had a really weird, crazy AI on it. But I love that. It was just this casual but deep enough that I could get into it when I was young. And I love the visual style of it, and so trying to make Apocalypse Later was trying to make something like that. And it kind of worked.
Yeah, it did. It did. It's the point-and-click aspect in particular, is such easy information to take in from the game and so easy to figure out how to maneuver around it, but not very easy to feel like you're definitely playing it right, which I thought was fun and kind of turned the classic JRPG boy and his mom going to start off and go through a coming-of-age story thing on its head in quite a nice way. And I related with it very well just because there was hours this morning when I was supposed to be doing something productive, but I was looking for a mole cricket in Animal Crossing for literally like 3 hours. And I'm like, I hate myself for doing this, but it's more important than anything else in my world right now, which is the same as the character in Apocalypse Later. For people who don't know, there is an apocalypse to be had, maybe, if he gets around to it, to the main character. Yeah. And if you do make a sequel, what do you think will happen there?
Well, he has already started working on this script. Basically, he's arrested for not completing the apocalypse, and you're actually going to be playing as the mother, going through different situations to try and get her son acquitted or taken out, or just out of jail. Because we really wanted to explore having a main character as an older woman, basically in that protective maternal role. No one messes with Mama Bear. In fact, that's probably at one point she will turn into a literal bear.
That sounds great. What were I didn't get around to asking you what were the games that inspired Apocalypse Later, and if anything inspired other than the work you were doing of I Get This Call Every Day, and just in general, what were the games that you played that made you think I could make video games beyond meeting Craig, of course, which is enough? But were there games that while you were playing them you thought, this is such a great thing, I'm so glad somebody made this, and then in turn, now that you're in a position to move towards that, those are the kind of games you would want to try to make? Even if it's just Chrono Trigger, that's a great game.
It is a great game, but I never really played a lot of games where I looked at it and said, yeah, I could make something like this. In fact, I usually had the opposite opinion when I was playing games when I was younger. It was like, how is this made? I have no idea. It was a mystical thing, It was just like, this thing exists, and I have no idea how it got here. And for a long time, I never even questioned the act of how it was produced. There were games that got me into playing games, but nothing really sort of got me into making them other than sort of the drive to see something created. And that's where I sort of pushed myself to find out, okay, so how do you make games? What kind of programs do you use? And I'm still really learning that, because I'm still very, very new, which is a bit of a struggle, because a lot of times, there's a lot of people making games who know a lot more about it than I do, and have sort of like this baseline knowledge. So when you're trying to learn about them, oftentimes the stuff you're trying to learn kind of assumes all that baseline, and I'm still like down here where it's like, what's a variable? What's a ternary operator? And I'm using examples that I actually knew, but that's
Sure.
just like, there's a lot of stuff that's just sort of like assumed, and I kind of look at it as like,
Sure.
and then sort of like, okay, so I look up this one thing, and it's like, oh, but you need to understand this, this, and this in order to actually use it. Okay, so let's research this first thing. Oh, and this first thing also requires this and this. So you get this exponential learning. That's sort of just,
like
you start from
a branching path of all the stuff you need to know, and then have to go back around to the other path. And have you ever thought about making a game about that process?
That's not
I
a
think
bad
a lot of
idea.
people could relate with it. I know so many people that want to make video games. More and more people. I think almost everyone who watches this show on a regular basis does so because they want to make video games. And there's a surprising audience for that. And almost everyone, I've talked to has gone through that feeling you're having of, I should know more than this, and the amount there is to know is just massive and almost insurmountable, and it takes a really particular kind of courage and tenacity, I think, to continue on with that, because it's so intimidating.
Courage and tenacity are the right words, because honestly, it takes a lot to make a game, and I don't think that should ever discourage anyone from making a game. I just think it should set realistic expectations. It's not going to be something that you could, there are certain programs you could work with where you could spend an hour on and have like the most basic of basic games. But, if that's something that you like, set your expectations there. If you want to be able to look at a square on the screen and press the left arrow key and he goes left, perfect. You could probably do that in an hour using like Stencil or Game Maker or something like that. Just sort of learning the basics. Maybe using that information, you could figure out how to make him go right with the right arrow, afterwards, and then figure out a jump. Well, maybe as soon as you figure out, changing a variable from plus to minus at some point. But yeah, it can happen, but just set the expectations that it's going to be small steps. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to look out and say, okay, I'm going to make a great JRPG. No, you want to make games. Get the smallest piece working first. Put a square on the screen. Move it with something. Or hell, with twine. Get a passage. Link it to another passage. Put 2 choices. Have ending 1 and ending 2. Start basic, and don't be ashamed of it. Because starting basic is like how you start. You don't start by making the next Chrono Trigger. You start at like the tiniest level, and you build up, and it takes time, and it takes tenacity. And it takes the courage to do stupid things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can't help but want to assess themselves on whatever their last project was, exactly how good that was. Mm-hmm. So I'm as good as that, square platformer I made. Oh no, I'm never going to be able to make a good video game. So they extrapolate that data and guess how good they're going to be, which is the exact opposite. It's the worse your games are now, a lot of the times, from what people tell me, the more you can learn from that. And the more you're able to see the flaws in your past games, the more potential you have to make better games. If you make a game and you think it's perfect, and you're done already, then number 1, you should just stop, because you did it. You made the best game. 2, chances are that game sucks, and you don't have what it takes to notice that, and you're probably not going to have what it takes to make better games later. So the more critical you are of your own work, hopefully people can see that as a reflection of their potential, as opposed to the fact that they're damned to always be in the exact same place. Hopefully they'll see that. I hope so.
Definitely. And I think that's true of making anything, not just video games,
It's true. It's true, absolutely. I was thinking while we were talking, I was going back in my head, because I hate to be overly critical of any human being and lump them all together and say that there's a group of people who are angry at people who are just talking about subjects. That's how I see it, but I know it's not as simple as that. I still want to get to the bottom of it. I feel like if today, on this episode of Sup Holmes, David S. Gallant, we can figure out why people get mad about those things sometimes, and then break through that anger, because we both know that anger, sometimes it's a great motivator, but it can also destroy a good conversation. When people are mad, then all of a sudden it turns into a battle instead of a exchange, and you're trying to hurt the other person or demote the other person's opinion instead of listening to it. So I want to listen to the people that are saying, I shouldn't have Lee Alexander on your show ever because she's going to hurt me, or just whatever they said. I want to understand where they're coming from. I want to have an exchange with them and mend the issue. Let's do that just right now. Let's fix it.
Maybe you should have one of them on the show, because I'm personally of a mind that Lee Alexander is great. I love what she does, and I wish there were ways we could get her to do more of it. So I have a hard time understanding people from that perspective as well. Just like you, I don't know where they come from. I guess in my case, I maybe don't have always the patience to listen to their side of the thing, and maybe that's a fault of mine, honestly. But at the same time, I also have a hard time when someone says this person shouldn't be doing something. Boom, like they're bad, they're evil, and they don't even make an effort to justify why. I have a hard time dedicating my own resources to giving them attention, you know?
Sure.
And yeah.
I think we're all just locked in our own skulls, you know? We're desperate to exchange with each other. We don't want to feel like we're totally trapped in these little boxes in our brains. And there must be feeling like their brain box is getting assaulted just by Lee Alexander talking about things that she thinks. Maybe they're coming from a place where they started playing video games because they felt like they were getting assaulted and criticized and felt like they didn't have the self-esteem to stand on. So they go to an escape where they're empowered, the video game. And then they're being told, no, don't play those video games, you jerk. At least that's what they're hearing. Because I feel like, the Lee Alexander episode, it had like 400 comments before it happened. So people were definitely like, maybe not 400, but at least 200. People were predicting they were going to be criticized by Lee, I think, and wanted to criticize her before she got a chance to. And then the episode is pretty benign. She was just like, I like Grand Theft Auto. It just could have been a little bit more critical of actual figures in power instead of just criticizing the same old stuff. And people were like, she hates Grand Theft Auto, therefore she hates me. Anyway,
that's all Leigh was actually saying in the first place.
That's all I noticed. Maybe I got selective memory. Maybe she said something meaner. I don't know. Anyway,
there definitely seems to be like a certain amount of hyperbole. Like, if a person says anything that is not positive about a thing, therefore they are being negative. And I kind of wish more people would sort of step back and go, okay, what is really being said here? I wish there was more critical thought in these discourses, because there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction. A lot of, this person has said something negative, therefore it must be that they're saying it is bad and I am bad. And that's sort of like that knee-jerk that happens there that causes a lot of this to spin out of control.
Yeah, the internet does it too. Like those comments you were leaving on, I'm sorry, whose blog was it again?
I don't know her real name. Her first name's Laura. She goes by Super Shiki.
We'll leave it at that. You didn't have the chance to write all the things you might have liked about the concept of their project and the things that could have gone right. You left you were pointing out an issue that was kind of hot button at the moment that you felt strongly about, and you got seen as someone who is just a troll, so they blanketed you and put you all in the he hates us and he's just hurting us for the sake of hurting us category, which I can't help but feel like the internet's to blame for that. I know Tommy Reffinus. I love Tommy Reffinus. I said it emotional. I just said it. If he were to talk to you personally about it, I bet it would have gone very, very differently. But the internet doesn't allow us that opportunity, unfortunately.
Well, it does. I mean, we're doing it right now, right? There could be more of this,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a lot easier to be indirect,
Many times video games appeal to people that don't want to have to deal with a face-to-face Skype call with a stranger, which I do almost every week. So the culture isn't bent in that direction a lot of the time right now. Hopefully that'll change. I like to think that it's changing. It seems like video games are getting more social every day. Kev...
One last thing.
Oh, sure, please. You've got questions, though. I want to make sure I get to those.
No problem. We'll get to the questions. But here's what I would ask. To the people who have issues with me, who have issues with Leigh, who have issues with anyone sort of that we've sort of characterized as sort of the other side in these debates that we've issued here, I'd love you to make a game about your side. I would love you to express what it is wrong with either me or Leigh or anyone else. Express it in a game, because like that's what I did. I took my feelings about my workplace and I put them into a game, and I would love those. And I'm not saying you can't make a game, because I want you to make games. I want everyone to make games, and if that's something that's truly passionate to you, express it in an interactive format, because you can tell someone so much more about your viewpoint by actually putting them in that shoes and forcing them to interact with it. So please make a game.
Absolutely, they could get together and make it. What a brilliant idea! I could understand why all the people that hate me so much. If they made a game about how terrible I was, I could see it from their perspective. I could watch my ugly graphics face come on and say, "Oh, you're dumb because you don't like the stuff I like, Nintendo games," or whatever they would make me do. Then I could at least see it from their perspective, which would be exciting for me. I would love to play a game like that. It's a wonderful suggestion. They could do it for Ludum. I've never known how to pronounce it. Dare or Dare?
I've been told it's Ludum Dare. Even when I did the keynote, people were like, "Why are you saying it weird?" So
it seems like a dare. But I've always, for people who don't know, Ludum Dare.
I think it's a Latin term. So that's
interesting.
So I contacted one of those living Latin speakers, of which there are none. So.
And for people who don't know what Ludum Dare is, and the keynote you did, that's something I definitely wanted to touch upon. Let them know, and then I will do the question, which we have a good amount already, which is fun. Thanks, guys, for asking questions.
Ludum Dare is a game jam. I believe it takes place 3 times a year, maybe 4. I always get that confused. Happens over a weekend, and it's not a local game jam. Basically, you can sign up. You can help vote on the themes that get picked, and it always comes down to one single theme, which you can follow or not, depending on what you want. And part of it's a competition, so if you want to do the competition, you have to work alone, and you have to divulge all of your source code or whatever you use to make the game, because sometimes you're not using like a coding interface. But you make a game over 48 hours, or if you want to do the more casual jam, then you get the extra day and it's 72 hours. But you just pick the theme, make a game, and then at the end everything gets uploaded to the website and people can vote on different categories for was it fun, was it good graphics, was it whatever. And there's no prizes or anything like that. Like for the competition, a winner is chosen based on the voting. But it's just for fun. It's like, oh hey, I won, cool. But the website can let people leave comments and see the ratings. So it's actually a really good way to make something under a time pressure, which is actually a really good way to start making games, is to try and give you a short amount of time, so it forces you to creatively solve problems and not try and worry about, oh, I'm not coding this the most elegant way possible. No, you just throw it and make it work somehow. And then getting that feedback on it is actually a really good process as well, because it's feedback by other game makers. It's people who made their own games in the Ludum Dare. So it's a bit better than throwing it up on, say, Greenlight and getting, hey, this was made in MS Paint. So.
Absolutely. What a good description. And we've had many guests on the show who've gotten their start in Ludum Dare, and now they're getting on Steam. Farmer Gnome got on Steam without even really having to try. And a lot of that was because of his Ludum Dare origins and what he learned from there and how he branched off. I don't know if you're familiar with his games. They're really neat. I like him a lot.
I can't remember the one specifically that he got on Steam. Was that Evoland? I'm
no.
mixing that up.
I mix up which one is about the ocean. Oh, rats. I'm terrible.
Capsize?
I'll have to look it up later.
He's
got that one about cowboys, too. He's so good at pixel art. Oh, I'm so happy about him right now, but I can't remember anything about its actual name.
Sorry, Gnome.
Yeah, I'll name drop him later after I'm not on live video stream and feeling a little self-conscious. XKevX asks, did you really only use MS Paint to make the art for I Get This Call Every Day?
No.
Did I say that? Is that my fault?
No, you didn't say that, but everyone else does. Okay, do you see this? This is a Bamboo graphics tablet. This is what I used to do all the art for I Get This Call Every Day. I used a program called GIMP, and I drew everything. Draw.
On GIMP. I've got GIMP. It's got a little gray fox on it. My Photoshop stopped working, so now I use GIMP, and I'm not very good with it. So it was all made in GIMP at work or at home?
No. If I'd made it at work, I would have been in way more trouble.
Yeah.
All on my machine. But yeah, no, that's actually because I can't draw. I have a horrible time drawing, and I realized because I was actually doing the art for this game originally for a Ludum Dare. It was for a sort of mini challenge in between the main ones, and the challenge was to make a not game. So, having a tedious conversation about a call in a call center seemed to me like the most not game thing I could pull from my own experience. And so I tried sketching out sort of just this basic office environment, and all my lines were jagged, and it looked all crooked, and I looked at it and like, this is as ugly as my workplace feels to me. So I just went with it. That was the aesthetic that I ended up going with it. Everyone calls it MS Paint. If it was MS Paint, it would just be like perfect squares and circles, because those are the only etches I can do in MS Paint.
It is definitely, in my opinion, a subverted compliment to say it looks like MS Paint, because it speaks to how much people related right away. Because what they're saying to you is, I've made stuff on MS Paint that looks like that. I thought it looked funny and cute and spoke to how I felt at the time, but I didn't think anyone else would do it. And you had the guts to take that visual style and put it out there in a game, which is obviously working. Like, people see that and they relate to, like, I immediately pictured you at work drawing that on MS Paint and just like making it that autobiographical. Like, in the moment, I'm drawing the guy that reminds me of Billy, like right there, or the other. So it's a weird compliment, but I think it is a compliment that they feel that way. Mono680 asks, David, should I quit my job at the call center and start making video games?
I'm going to say no, only because video games don't pay very well. That's a bit of a problem. We started to talk a little bit about this. You were getting this reputation for being the anti-Steam Greenlight guy, so much so that it expanded into this idea that you were voting no on everyone's page just out of spite that Steam Greenlight existed. I know, that's how rumors get started. Some people think I have had sex with Reggie Fils-Aimé just because I like Pikmin so much. You know, like, oh, I heard you did him in the bathroom. Of course he wouldn't be attracted to me. Have you seen me? I'm sure Reggie had everything to do with Pikmin, too. Like, don't get me wrong. Reggie's an okay guy. I'm sure he's got a really nice body. Like, I'm not saying I wouldn't, but...
So, you know, these little sparks of who we are expand into these big rumors eventually. And was a spark of you that was not so happy with Steam Greenlight. You're not alone on that. Sophie Holden, someone I respect and follow her work very closely. She's talked about Steam Greenlight for a long time, and a lot of indie developers have. What were your thoughts on Greenlight, and why are you're hypocrite Gallant now, right? Gallant. Yeah, you're hypocrite Gallant. So tell us all about that.
So, I back in December, just about a week after I launched the game, I put the game on Greenlight. It wasn't a very fun experience. It got better after I got fired, because that situation, it got me a lot of sympathy. You know, whether deserved or not, there's a lot of people for whom the story was, this guy lost his job, let's help him out. And but for the most part, like, there were a lot of negative comments. Though when I graphed them out, like, I actually took all the comments and rated each based on whether I thought it was positive, negative, confusing, or just ambivalent. And only a fifth of them were actually negative to me. Like, the majority of them, about over half, were positive. But I still, to me, would look at those comments and thought, man, so much negativity. Just because that's the power of negative comments. You know,
sure,
like the negative ones always stick in your mind. You don't really remember the good ones. But mostly it was just the fact that Greenlight ranks everything by votes, which means that if my game starts doing well, every game with less votes than me goes down in the rankings. The more votes I get, the more games I push back in those rankings. So Greenlight isn't really a community thing amongst the different games that are on there. It's competition. And it's less so of a competition now with Valve just basically scooping up massive swaths of games and throwing them on Greenlight. But back when it was, 10, 15 games at a time, it definitely was a competition just to get Valve's attention in the first place. And it didn't jive well with me. The whole situation that happened with Paranautical Activity kind of was the last straw. When Paranautical Activity tried to go through with a publisher and Steam said, no, sorry, we're not going to set the example that getting a publisher can absolve you of Greenlight. So back to Greenlight you go. And that was kind of where I went, no, you know what, this is bullcrap, I'm getting off. A whole bunch of other games got off Greenlight around the same time. It just wasn't really publicized. And yeah, so I beyond that was May when I took it off Greenlight. Now we're in October. In the month of October, 168 games were greenlit during the whole month, between their 2 batches of 30-some and then their 1 batch of 100. And most of the games that got greenlit had about the same number of votes that my game did when I took it off. So I'm looking at that going like, if I had just left it on there, probably would be on Steam right now. So being in the financial situation that I'm in, Greenlight hasn't fixed. It hasn't addressed any of the problems that I had with it. But I can't also keep it off knowing that by staying off, I'm preventing any chance of getting on Steam and thus getting a better shot at being able to pay my rent and,
Sure.
and feeding my wife and I and our
The more
3
people play your game, if it's on Steam, I mean, everybody involved, you, Valve, the player, will win if you get it on Steam, but you're still... Do you feel like you're supporting Steam Greenlight by asking to be on Steam Greenlight?
I definitely am. I mean, the fact is that, every time I link to the game, I'm driving people not just to my game's page, but, because it's relatively easy to go from my page to any other game on Greenlight, I am supporting that system. And, I still do support it. I will still go in every day, see what's new, and vote yes on everything. Like, I could screenshot my page right now. It says that I voted, it doesn't say what I voted yes to, but it says that I voted on, 1,800 items on Greenlight. And yeah, it's once you've gotten to the end of it, it's okay. Like, if you just keep up with the new stuff, there's maybe 5 to 10 new things added every day, and that's just people literally just putting their games up. But that first day took about a week of basically yes, next, yes, next, yes, next. Because I'm not.
But if you vote for everything, then that
it
you
had
didn't
no
vote
effect.
for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially because I made that knock against the rankings of it, right? Well, if my vote goes to everything, then I'm not upsetting the rankings at all. So it's the only form of protest I could think of is just voting yes to everything, because then the system's meaningless. If I voted yes to everything, then what? Does Steam Steam Greenlight everything? Maybe that's the end goal,
They have
get all
changed
those
a
games
little.
in there.
I mean, you were saying that they haven't changed the problems that you had with it that you know of. They might have secretly, unless they're telling you stuff that I haven't heard, which they of course could be, I shouldn't assume, but
No.
it seems like what goes on behind closed doors at Steam Greenlight is anyone's guess. And they were, like you were saying, they were doing 10, 15 games for a little while, and all of a sudden they were 100 games greenlit today. I was like, what? And I was excited for all those developers, but I didn't understand what kind of secret policy change happened. They've got so much power, and I think people expect a lot out of Valve because they are known to be guys that really care about game developers and players, and they've got such a well-won reputation for having their hearts in the right place. And everything Gabe Newell has said about Greenlight is kind of screwed up, and I'm sorry, I've taken that to heart. So it's definitely not a black and white thing, but there are probably things they need to fix that we just don't know exist, maybe.
Yeah, their process for actually picking the games that get greenlit is a mystery to everyone, right? And I guess it's the same mystery as it was when you would email them privately and say, hey, I want to get on Steam, the pre-greenlight process. But it's not really like they have to disclose what that process is, but I think that process has clearly changed if they are greenlighting such massive amounts of games at a time. Either they've just got more people looking at them, or they're maybe being less picky about what they pick. I don't know.
I wonder if the criticism, because so many developers were coming out and saying, I won't be able to survive, or I'll have to, even then, I'll have to get a full-time minimum wage job, and who knows if I'll make it, or I might be in the homeless shelter, because Steam is this process that I don't know if I can bank on it or not. It's too mysterious and too difficult.
If I could give any advice to any developer right now, never plan to get on Steam. Never make that your plan to survive, because there are zero guarantees there. I mean, number one, to go back to Mono's question about should he quit his job and get into indie game dev full time, better to do both. And I understand that's going to be incredibly challenging. I actually had to step down part-time in my job before I got fired, but there were several months where I was only working 3 days a week, which was tight on the budget, but at least it gave me 2 days where I could work on games. And that's where I got a lot of I Get This Call Every Day done. In fact, I programmed the whole engine during jury duty. I had a whole week where I was supposed to be in courts, and most of that was just sitting around, so I brought my laptop, and I hammered out the engine during that time, which was a huge, huge help. It probably would take me a lot longer to get that finished. But, yeah.
Have you ever thought about making like a cookbook or an emotional, intellectual recipe for people to be able to get enough energy to keep making the game and get fed energy for making it, because it can be so draining, I imagine. The developers I know who manage to slog through it and do the self-imposed crunches, they have a kind of internal economy, an internal system where they spend just as much energy as they get back from making the game and manage to do a job at the same time. As you find yourself mastering it, I think that would be an excellent guidebook to potentially throw together for people.
I'd more want the guidebook for myself because I'm horrible. I'll be honest. The last game that I made was Hemo Racers, which I actually made on the weekend just before I was fired. It was for a global game jam, and that was the weekend where we made Hemo Racers. And I haven't made anything since then. Getting fired and dealing with the fallout sort of, first of all, it kind of put me into like this weird business media mode where I was, sorting out business things with I Get This Call Every Day and dealing with interviews and emails for a long time. And as it's petered out, I'm having a real hard time get back to making games. I'm less focused. My depression's hit me in a bigger way than ever before. I actually had to start taking medication for it. And I can't find what it was that got me making games in the first place. So it's been really difficult. And so if that advice book about mastering that energy to get you making games, I want that, please. It would help.
I'll try to find it for you. If anybody deserves it, it's you. And I am hoping that once you get another boost of energy from the next thing, because you're keeping yourself involved in this world. You're watching, you're pushing your game on Greenlight, of course. Something's going to happen that will hopefully right the wrong of the momentum block that you were hit with when you were basically punished for, on a subconscious level, this is my analytical side coming out, you were punished for expressing yourself and making a game. And I can tell that you have a fire in you that's angry about that and wants to push back and instead keep expressing yourself, which I think is fantastic, as opposed to being letting yourself get pushed down. And you want to help other people who've been pushed down. You have it in you to want to join voices with them and help for your collective voice to be louder. But at the same time, how can you not on some subconscious level be like, if I make a video game, maybe next time they'll take my house, like on some level. This is off the cuff analysis, of course, but that's how I would feel if I were you. I should get to more questions though. Being a jerk. Tony Perelio, I hope I pronounced your name right, Tony, asks, how was your experience overall at IndieCade this year?
Oh, yes. IndieCade was actually really awesome. And most of it wasn't from IndieCade itself. It was the people. I ended up sharing a room with Ananthropy and Maricopas, and hanging out with them was awesome. I spent a night wandering around high off of Pot Cookie with Richard Hoffmeyer. I got to hang out in an open bar with John Vignacchi and Adam Boyes from Sony and Disney rospectively, other way around, whatever. I got to chill out with Matty Bryce and Tony Roca. I can't remember if I got Tony's name right. And Lulu. I'm sorry.
Tony
from
Roca,
Gamer.
Yeah, I think so.
GamerX, I believe, involved with. Yeah. I just met T.J. Thomas, Sean Alexander Allen, just all these awesome people. Oh yeah, and I trolled him. Um, uh, Panel discussions were all right. I had close to a religious experience playing Sound Self on an Oculus Rift, which was really amazing. I don't know if you've touched that at all.
Sound Self?
Yeah, Richard Arnott's game. Robin Arnott.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not so much a game as it is sort of like this sound and visual feedback loop. You sort of produce a tone like into a microphone, and it produces visuals and brings sort of the tone back to you. Sort of reinforces itself, and the visuals are very. I mean, he made the game because he went on LSD, right? So it's very trippy, and the added effect of having it like in an Oculus, sort of dominating your entire vision. I spent a good 10 minutes with it, just trying different tones and playing around with it, and I hugged him afterwards because it was very amazing. The Oculus had a booth there, and the game they were showing didn't really take full advantage of the Oculus, so I was kind of disappointed. But he kind of made me believe in that thing, and just it was something else. It was like having drugs without taking anything. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Wow.
It's
so you were feeling the sense of community and experience at that event. It sounds like. What do you think was different about that particular?
Well,
was just
part of it was. I think part of it was the fact that community helped me get there. You know, like I had crowdfunded for the going in the first place, and backers. I swear, first music video is coming next week. Okay.
What?
So
I hadn't heard about this. You're making a music video?
One of the backer rewards for my Indiegogo campaign to go to Indiecade was that for $7 I would perform a video singing a song of your choice, and 62 people took me up on that. So the first one should be out next week. I'm hopefully going to start producing them on a bit faster schedule. I've had some difficulty working this week.
Are you making the music as well?
Well, I'm trying to find the music and sort of de-lyricize them so I can. I'm not doing the music. I am not musically talented. In fact, I'm not really that much of a singer either. But that's not going to stop me.
I've got a Casio keyboard and the will to press start on it and change the keys. I could even help you do "We Don't Need Another Hero" or whatever that song is to be on Thunderdome.
I'll have to take a look at what some of the requests are, because there's some out there stuff. Like the first one is Soprano, the Great Mighty Pooh song from Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, like, I got the audio pretty much mastered for that one. It's just recording the video. I kind of wanted to for that in particular because it's directly referencing the game. So I want to transfer it a little bit to that. Maybe. But yeah, we'll take a look at that request list and see if we can collaborate. I'm sure
I will help if I can, free of charge. And I think I've been trying to get a hold of the guy who created Conker's Bad Fur Day to be on the show. He has a new game coming out called Rusty Pup, and I think that's adorable. So if I do get in touch with him, I will ask him directly, because I think he sang that. I think so. Glad. He seems like a neat guy.
Cool.
More questions coming in though.
Oh wow.
Yambi asks, how different is the game development process compared to modding a pre-existing game? Have you ever done any modding of games?
That's a good question. I haven't really modified any games. They're not that different depending on the framework that you're working with. I mean, some games are made to be modded and thus make it a little easier for people to get at the assets and toy around with them. Some of them have those built into the game engine themselves. You know, like Little Big Planet is a game built around basically creating your own mods because the tools are within game. But you know, early modding was a lot of digging into the files of a game, seeing what files dealt with what, and modifying them at that level. So modding can be pretty much the same as game creation, just you have the added challenge when you're trying to get into that level of working with someone else's work and trying to figure. It's almost like playing detective. You know, it's like, init.dll. What does this do? Let's double click. There's all these lines. Let's start changing stuff and see what happens in the game. So a lot of that is trying to learn from someone else's stuff, and if you're doing a collaboration, that can come up when you're making a game too. You know, multiple programmers working on a project, and someone sends you, okay, here's the animation script, and you look at it, and it's like, I don't understand a damn thing here. There's a saying among programmers that hell is other people's code, and I kind of subscribe to that only because of my own experience, because a lot of people code at a level above me, and I don't always clue into their conventions and ways of organizing things that are probably better, but I never learned them because I never had formal training on any of it. So,
well, hell can be productive. It sounds like if you tackle hell in the right way, you can end up. Yeah. That's what they're going through with healthcare.gov here in the United States. I guess they're trying to rewrite each other's code and slowly making some progress. I think. I don't know. I only know a little bit about computers. Seems hard.
Hey, it's not without its rewards, but yeah, it's also not without its challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. R. Xanadu, this is a great question. He's a frequent viewer of the show. Thank you for watching. As always, R. Xanadu. I've been working on a game idea for a while, and here it is. Have the player give out awesome high fives, which make amazing things happen. I'm having trouble making up scenarios for it. Any thoughts? Have any suggestions? So most of the time, when I have ideas for a game developer or someone who's even fancying the idea of it, they're like, you know what? I have a million ideas, and I have enough energy to make one of them, and I have to know how to make one of them. So please, no more ideas. But he's actually asking us for ideas. It's fantastic.
Maybe if one of the scenarios can be that your hand gets bigger so you can give more than one person a high five at once.
Whoa. That's a nice power-up. I was just telling my friend Caitlin Cook, who also writes for Destructoid, about one of the best high-five experiences I had. I was in Tokyo with Tyrone Rodriguez of Nicholas, and he was introducing me to the developers at Nigoro, who made La Mulana, which is a neat game. And we were all drinking beers, and I think the guy who made Tori Bash was there too, and I was very disoriented and starstruck and confused. And I was teaching the guys at Nigoro how to fist bump and then go, and I would like go like this, and they went, it just like blew on me. So I went, no, go, explosion. So they would just fist bump me and go, explosion. It was cute. I didn't quite tell that story right. But that would be great in the high five game, to teach people all the different types of high fives and make it a bonding experience, actually learn the ins and outs and the special handshakes and this and that. That would be great.
That's not explored enough in games. The act of actually teaching someone something else isn't really explored a lot in games, because games are most often trying to teach you about what they are. And I think that would be really cool. Teaching people
to be
high
able
fives.
to teach someone else. Yeah, in the game, you are the teacher for a change.
Yeah.
Huh. Very interesting. And we didn't talk much about your work at PSN stores and your picture of Fat Princess. I don't know if that's even worth delving into. It'd be worth talking about. It's adorable. Did you feel like you were potentially stepping on any toes there, or because there was so much? It seems like old news now, but I remember having very mixed feelings about Fat Princess when it came out, because on one end I was excited that they were like, an overweight person can be attractive and likable. On the other end it was like, and they are a thing you carry around. I was like, meh.
Yeah. At the time, like, I wasn't as critical as I was back then, and at the time, Fat Princess didn't seem as problematic to me as I look back on it now and sort of look at the connotations of that. I mean, I was more just excited at the time of like, hey, this game looks to scratch my itch for Team Fortress 2, but also looking, really cute and having the sort of medieval focus that I like. And in the end, I thought the game was okay. It didn't really scratch the itch that I thought it would. But the experience of dressing up for it was pretty fun.
And you speak to another issue that I meant to bring up. Hopefully it's not just old news, but I hope people can know you can like something there's problematic aspects to it, and then you can be proud of acknowledging it and being aware of the stuff that you're playing and what it means, and not feel bad about yourself for liking something that is problematic. I freaking love Punch-Out! It's like the most racist game ever made, or at least racially insensitive.
Yes, it
fantastic
is.
game. It's hilarious.
But it's also, like, in terms of game feel and in terms of how well that progresses, it's a really good game.
Absolutely.
But you recognize where it's problematic, and playing it doesn't necessarily say that you support the racism inherent in that game. You know, I don't know about you, but I play a lot of Spelunky. And, you know, that game has a damsel issue, but
and we had Derek Yu on that. He talked about, was like, oops. He felt genuinely bad about it and tried to fix it. But Derek Yu isn't a bad guy because he might have put out something that had a problematic note in it here and there. Now, none of us are going to be perfect at expressing our ideas and keeping everyone from potentially being hurt by what we do. We're not bad people by making small missteps here and there, even if they're, you know, you may not want to call them missteps, you might want to just call them miscommunications or whatever it is. Why do people feel so gosh darn sensitive about that? I'm trying to figure that out. It looks like you became perfectly still like a statue.
I mean, I think we touched on it before.
Are you getting him, Conrad? Is that you? Not getting it. No. Maybe you're only seeing me. David's connection was bad. I was listening hard, hoping he was coming back in. I don't know if he is. Looks still like a statue on that picture. It's tense. What's going to happen next? Maybe he'll be back. Maybe I will be alone.
Beware, lost guest.
Well, Sinistar, maybe we'll have to wrap the show. Oh, now it's just a photograph of him looking up in the sky. You didn't get to sign off with David Gallant. Rats. Well, anyway, I guess I'll sign off for him. We'll end the show a little early. Unfortunate. David Gallant. I mean Gallant. You can follow him on Twitter. Oh, is he back, David?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, phew, we lost you. I was just going to sign off on your behalf. We missed most of after I said Derek Yu is a good guy, even though he did a damsel in this game. Almost everything he said after that was, I think, gone. Oh no, he's frozen again! Ah, computers. This is just what we were talking about before. You try to do them right, and then they just do wrong on you. All you can do is try. Well, I'm going to officially sign him off, I suppose. Durr. Right. Look for him on Twitter. Look for his game on Greenlight. See how it's going for him. Leave a comment. Engage with him. Wait, you're back? I'm going to give you one last chance, David Gallant. Can you do it? Statue again. Rats. Up.
I'm back. Hello?
Yeah? Are you?
Yay, I'm back.
I think we should probably sign off while the getting's good, though, because unstable computers on somebody's end. Not your fault. Thank you for being on. How can they follow you from here? On Twitter, on Steam?
Twitter's probably best. I am
Yes.
David S. Gallant. Yeah, I'm a Steam user. Name's David S. Gallant, but I'm not often playing multiplayer games. But hey, if you want to trade trading cards, hey. I'm still trying to complete another set of Gone Home. And my website, davidsgallant.com, I sometimes update it with new stuff that I'm doing. And that's about it.
We didn't mention the game that you made for your wife, which I thought was so cute.
Oh, a game for Anne. Yeah. Yeah. I still need to work on the sequel.
Oh, that'll be good. I'm glad you're working on all these sequels. And I will help you do a thing sometime, so let me know. For me, you can follow me. I'm Tron Knots on Twitter. This show is on Destructoid's YouTube channel. You can get the reruns there, and also older episodes are on Detroit TV YouTube channel. So you can watch them or listen to them there, and reruns are also on iTunes. Just look up Sup Holmes. Google it. Google Sup Holmes, iTunes. So many episodes now. I think we're into 80-something. I think I'm booked out until the end of December still. I want to ask Bennett Foddy if he wants to be on. I think we're going to have the Hyperlight Drifter guys on in January, too, which is exciting. So yeah, big plans. We're not going to quit doing Sup Holmes, I don't think. I like doing it. As long as people show up, I'll talk to them. I guess that's it. David, are you there? He's just a statue man again. Rats. Okay, sign off. It's Jonathan Holmes. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.